Welcome back to the Gray Report. I'm excited. I'm joined, co-hosting today on the Gray Report, Katrina Greene, Senior Vice President of Property Management at Gray Residential. Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, gosh.
Known by many.
Yes. Well, yes.
Some.
Yeah, I have been equated to that.
In the past.
I like to think in a
force of
positive
nature,
way.
as some
Thank you.
have described you. How's it going, Katrina?
It's going great. I'm excited to be here. I think this is our first official crossover episode because I have the complex, and we, certainly are talking about. It's a different topic in the same business, so this is just going to be fun because it's a nice blend today.
Yeah, it's like where two worlds collide. And so Katrina hosts her own podcast called The Complex that focuses more on operations, property management. So definitely check that out. We posted on the Gray Capital YouTube channel also. So if you subscribe to the Gray Capital YouTube channel, which if you don't do that already, might as well do that right now. But then you can go on wherever you get your podcast and also subscribe to the Complex. And so often in like multifamily, like media and podcasts, is like niche as it is, so much of it is just on the investment side because people are trying to raise money and they're talking about deals, and that's great. That's an important component to it. The industry wouldn't exist without that side of it. But often it misses the actual like business of the real business. Yeah. And so that's what you do on the Complex and every single day in your life.
in real life, for sure.
And so it's just awesome to have you on once again.
Thank you.
Wanted to get through first. We're going to do a couple news reports, kind of like we usually do on the Gray Report, talking about the Federal Reserve. We're going to talk about cap rates. We're going to talk about kind of this slow leasing season that we've experienced from our perspective, but it's also like a national perspective also. But before we do, I do just have to say, if you are a credit investor and you haven't checked out Gray Capital's latest multifamily investment offering, Flats at Stones Crossing, go check it out. Go to graycapitalllc.com. There's a button below. You can click that link, sign up to get the deck, schedule a meeting with the team. We're really excited about it. We're going to be closing just in a couple weeks now. There's not that much equity remaining. There's only a few spots. But if you schedule a meeting now, we might be able to secure a spot for you. And even if it's not this deal, we'd love to have a conversation during a live deal to see if just working with Gray Capital is a good fit. But if not, that's all great too. Just ignore it and enjoy the podcast. Okay, let's talk. Let's jump into this first article.
Yeah.
Drone Pal, JPal. We have our own JPal.
We do have our own JPal.
We have our own
it's
JPal.
Funny every time we say. I think it's funny every time we say it, but yeah.
I do too. But Drone Pal, he was in Jackson Hole, Wyoming last week on Friday. He was giving a speech, highly anticipated to kind of indicate the pivot for the Federal Reserve. There's been this push and pull where certainly like the Trump administration, a lot of the market is saying, hey, look, we've got a slowing economy. You need to lower interest rates to kind of keep the economy boosted up. Certainly apartment owners would appreciate that if you're trying to refinance, you're trying to buy a deal because interest rates are so high.
Yeah.
If you're just an average, American looking to buy a house, you also really like that idea because it's really hard to buy a house right now. The down payments are really, really expensive. So there's a lot of people that like this idea, but the concern is if you lower interest rates too soon, then do we cause more inflation? Because the other thing we've been dealing with is just rising costs.
Yeah.
Everyone's been dealing with that from from eggs to the materials, but then in our world, we deal with it every single day.
Every day, all of our materials, and then labor cost. As in the same somewhat relationship to that, and so it doesn't slow down, and it impacts us at every turn.
Every angle.
Turn.
And so, monetary policy, like a lot of things in life, like there's two sides of the coin. And so you make it easier to finance, you make it cheaper, the debt cheaper. Do you make everything else more expensive? And that's the concern. And we were also talking about if rates are lower, potentially you're going to see more people actually being able to buy homes. And right now there's this huge gap between the cost to buy a home versus to rent. It's never been, technically, comparing to buy a home, it's never been cheaper to rent, which it doesn't seem cheap to rent either if you're a resident.
Certainly not. But
it is cheaper relative than buying a home. We talked about this just before we started. Is that a concern? As rates come down, again, Jay and I can go around and be like, hey, we're going to buy another deal, Katrina.
Yeah.
But how much concern for you is it's going to hit us operationally from maybe see some labor costs rise, materials continuing to rise.
Yeah.
And then is it competition on the single family home side?
Yeah, definitely. There's concern, and it's not like it's going to change our renewal, our retention, and it's not going to take it from, where we maybe we're retaining 55%, now we're only retaining 40%. Like it's not that kind of a gap, but if we're budgeting, and have been reaching, actually one community, June and July, we were 68% retention. And, as we're talking about on a large scale, what those rent to income ratios are looking like, and then housing availability, especially in a market where there are, attainable housing choices, that's really where I see it impacting us is just, maybe 5, 6, 7% on the retention, based on what we planned. And then obviously that goes into the turn. So I don't think it's a mass exodus. I've been in the business a long time and I can remember moments, maybe 06 or so when it was just everybody coming in, giving notice, buying house, buying house, buying house, buying house. I don't expect that with this, perceived or potential small change in September.
Was that in 2006? And just because I don't think we've talked about this, and I wasn't in the industry in 2000. Well, I was trying to flip a house in 2006.
Okay.
And I remember the strategy was because my buddy in high school's dad was teaching us how to do it, and the plan was, anyone can get a mortgage to buy these homes. So we just have to fix up this cheap house and find somebody off the street. They'll be able to buy it.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden that wasn't true and we couldn't find anybody to buy it.
Yeah.
And we had to turn it into a rental.
Yeah.
But so you remember back, so in 2000, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean,
was
there.
Literally everyone was just saying, hey, I'm going buying a house because...
Yes, it was incredibly easy, very little red tape. We had people that were, consistently late on their rent that could get a mortgage easier than they could get an apartment, truly at the time, because that was back when you were doing these paper verifications and, noting and, reporting what people's rent history was like. And I got my real estate license while I was in the apartment industry because I wanted to understand it. Now, turns out, they don't really teach you much about lending. And sort of, traditional real estate courses. I'm not saying you don't learn anything, but, I sought other sources and, there were so many new communities being built, tiny houses, tiny lots, shake your neighbor's hand out their window and your window, but it was a house. It was the American dream. It was, I need to get out of this apartment and, provide. And so, and they were geographically right next door to my apartment community. So
they could just walk right across. They see it right there.
The model home every day.
Yeah.
And so, just notice after notice after notice. And we understood enough about the Nehemiah loans and, the buy down options and what that was going to look like and the tax assessments that no one understood. So we actually held a class in our clubhouse. At some point I just said, I know this sounds crazy, but let me have a class on home buying.
Yeah.
Thinking that there would be some, just real reflection in that moment about, is my family ready? Is this the right choice? Didn't have that impact on any of them. Had a great impact on me. The speaker came from HUD, spoke about how she foreclosed on a first home, and I was in it long enough to see those foreclosures come back. I was in it long enough for us to change our policies on our screening to allow foreclosures into our apartment communities because of what happened. So there was I would say absolutely a mass exodus at that point.
Now, I guess 2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Did it start coming back? I mean, there was definitely negative rent growth, kind of that 2007 through middle of 2009 maybe, and then it started coming back and we had some kind of above trend growth for a couple of years after that, or at least for I think 2 years after that. Did you feel that? Did all of a sudden it was all these people who bought a home are now looking to rent an apartment, or was it just it's a recession and everybody's not having a good time? And
I remembered some of it, but whole truth, I sold real estate at that point. So
moving on to
I did and made some really strategic partnerships and actually connected people with these Epcon community condos. And so my daughter was little. I already had my license. I left multifamily just for a short time.
Yeah.
So
that's when you were trying to sell the condos at Solano.
Look, kind of, yeah. It's the strangest full circle. Moment. But I was the part-time salesperson at Renaissance Bay that became Solana, that is now
we now own and manage.
Interesting.
Apartments.
So but I do definitely remember the demand coming back, and I remember that not all operators did modify their policies. So there were some operators that wouldn't accept a foreclosure. And, even on bankruptcy, it got a little bit tricky because that's how some people were trying to salvage the rest of their lives as it related, to credit. And they came back just horribly broken. Some of them I predicted for sure. I mean, I always worked in a small town. And so when you do that, I still see people that I've evicted at Walmart, and see people that I was very close to. So, it's just like that. But I saw them come back pretty broken after they went out and bought a house. Shouldn't have been given a mortgage, truly, all things considered.
Yeah.
And so the demand was there, and maybe it's been doing really well since then. And I think that's a community that you have some ownership in.
Yeah.
So you can picture it.
So
small world.
One thing that's interesting, we were talking about, interest rates are high, maybe they're going to come down, but we're still seeing people buying homes. We're talking about like when we do like move out surveys of our residents, there's not just from like our A-class communities, but from some of our more like affordable lower A affordable communities. People are at least telling us they're going out and buying a home. Is that surprising sometimes when folks from like a Class C, Class B asset want to buy a house?
A little bit, but if if you're on whatever, realtor.com, homes.com, any of those regularly, as many of us are, just to try to understand our pricing as it relates to the single family rental market. And some of those sites you can see, for sale or for rent. There are affordable options out there. They may not be anyone's dream home.
Yeah.
And they may not be, in a certain neighborhood or anything like that, but it is still, the kind of living that some people absolutely prefer and rather maybe are more well suited for. So, it surprises me a little bit that, when we think about all the challenges that we have in that Class C.
Well, I talk to people all the time that are, more kind of, middle 20s, young professionals, but who have careers who are still of the mindset of like, I can't buy a home. Like, I don't know when I could. Maybe I want to at some point, but it's just right now it's not realistic. But then I turn around and see people who, are paying, $1,000, $1,200, a month. It seems to be kind of stretching their budget, but then saying, I'm going to go out here and buy a home.
I'm going
to do it.
Yeah.
Which, to props to them to be able to, to save up and to figure it out, to make a plan. It reminds us, a lot of people are, choosing to rent, not just because it's their only option or they're choosing to rent somewhere that isn't as, luxurious and fancy. A lot of people are thinking about their financial future and seeing as a way to save money for a period of time to then, up level their life in the future.
Yeah.
And so it's a good reminder, I think, like when we were talking about, some of our communities that really surprised us. It's a reminder not to, kind of stereotype, one community or the other or the people that live there.
Yeah.
And that it's pretty diverse and people have, really, interesting lives and got their own stories and can do good things.
I know. Sometimes I'm like, we need just a human interest, podcast, if you will, and bring some, residents, certainly employees, just like the life story thing. And there's like a psychological benefit to some of that too, because of the disconnect, because of how disconnected everybody is. Truly.
It really seems like that at some point.